So what is branding? How different is branding from advertising your product or your business? How should you go about it as a small business trying to create an identity for yourself? If you want answers to this question, there's more reason you should stay with us here in this edition of Business Time, because we'll discuss this with an expert in this field. We'll also bring you some business news and then bring you activities on the commodities and forex markets that took place over the week. My name is Kemini Amano. This is Business Time, and you're welcome. After years of serving you with the best in business and financial stories, Business and Financial Times comes to you 5 times in a week with the introduction of the Thursday edition. Your credible and trusted source of relevant business information will, from Monday to Friday, that is 5 times a week, continue to bring you all the information you need in business, the economy, real estate, maritime, sports and entertainment. Business and Financial Times, Africa's leading provider of credible business information. Welcome back to the program. This is Business Time and my name is Kemini Amano. In a moment, let's take a listen to what went down in the world of business. The past year has seen the petroleum downstream sector go through a major revolution led by successful price deregulation. Mr. Musasaga, the CEO of the National Petroleum Authority, speaking at a petroleum downstream industry meeting in Accra, said price deregulation has, among other things, eliminated subsidies, improved the liquidity of importers, and renewed investor confidence. A difficult decision by the NPA to start implementation of the petroleum product price deregulation on 16 June 2015 has resulted in a turnaround of fortunes for players in the industry, particularly state-owned entities like Bost, Tor and Goil, and has also introduced keen competition among service providers, ultimately benefiting the consumer. The Bank of England has given a starkest warning yet that a UK vote to leave the EU in the June referendum could lead to higher unemployment and lower growth. Its latest inflation reports forecast inflation will reach 0.9% in September as long as the UK stays in the EU. The report expected that after slowing in the second quarter of the year, growth will pick up in the second half. In this week's episode, like I said, we'll discuss branding, both for whatever kind of branding that comes with. And we'll do that discussion with Fatima Mohammed. She is an African brand warrior, and she's joined us here on Business Time this week. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Let's start off with what branding is. What exactly is it?
Branding is literally putting an identification, a mark, creating something that you could be known for. It started way in the previous era where cattles were marked with, a sign to say that belonged to me. Today, it's not just about a mark. It's about what you stand for, walking your talk. So when people recognize you, they recognize you for exactly what you've always presented to be. That's what your branding is.
Are there types of branding?
There are various types of branding. I mean, there's corporate branding, there's product branding, there's nation branding, there's individual branding, but all of them with the same ethos. It's just that how you present it.
I think we'll look at 3 of them. If we look at products, we'll look at corporate, and then country branding. We'll probably wrap it up with that one. But what are some of the key factors that will go into branding? Perhaps you could take us through the processes.
Well, first and foremost, one of the things that is very, very key when you're going to work on a product brand, for example, when companies are coming up and saying that they want to set up a brand, most importantly, they need to know who their target audience is, who are the consumers. Is it going to be something that's for the trade? Is it for institution? Is it for consumers? And then what is it that brand is going to stand for? Because positioning comes into place. It's not just about taking a product and saying, okay, we're going to put a nice fancy label on it and give it a nice name. All that becomes a package, because When somebody goes to pick up that product, it's supposed to be talking to them. When it talks to them, it has to talk to them about what it stands for. What does it represent of you when I lift it? And when somebody's carrying a Gucci is very, very different with somebody who's used to carrying a Michael Kors, for example, because it does something for you. It lifts your esteem. For some people, it makes them feel a little bit more, hoity-toity than others. So that's exactly what that brand must embody in terms of what does it make you, the carrier, feel about it.
How long do you have to do that to create
It's a process.
that identity?
It's a process, and I think that's where we as Africans normally miserably fail in comparison to the first world brands, because they take time. They put in research. They do understand who their consumers are. They do understand what is the gap that the market has. It's not about just coming up with a brand because you see somebody doing X. We go quickly and replicate another cola and put it in and name it. And that's the sad part. That's the reason Africa has become such a dumping ground, because people just assume that we really don't care about what gets thrown to us. You can name it everything, and we're just going to take it. It's something that has a requirement in terms of understanding the research, the consumer's mindsets, what makes them tick. Why should you pick a particular name? Why the colors? For example, if you're going to food, you can't be using the color black because that doesn't go with food. You can't be using a national flag because that's not the regulation aspects of it that will allow it. So there are various facts. It does take time. It does take time. And normally when I see brands being churned out, within a month or two, I get very scared because it shows there was no thought process behind it at all.
Let's look at, I think one of the biggest issues that people who want to identify themselves as a particular brand will have to go through is knowing who they are themselves. What are some of the questions you can ask yourself to be able to answer that question of who you are? It'll be easier to say,
Absolutely.
okay, I'm targeting these people, but okay, what do I have? Who am I? What am I given?
Yep. See, so there are two different things. If it's a brand, it's actually innate. It's not alive until the time that you've given it a reason for being. So if it was a product, if it was a toothpaste or it was a cream or whatever, you bring it to life based on what are the things that you are going to do about it and how you present it. And the consumer, the person who's receiving it, is the one who brings it to life because they can see an association with that brand. When it comes to individuals and branding themselves, I mean, you sitting here are definitely identified with a certain aspect of you, whether it's to do with the business sector, or whether it's being a presenter or being a confident person. Likewise, you have people, for example, presidents of countries, or you talk about fashionistas, or you talk about actors and actresses. They have to be known about something. The key element in both a product and an individual is consistency. You cannot be talking about certain things, about the way you are, your way of living in one way, and then you go and start doing something else and behaving in a different manner. I mean, I'll take an example, for example, Donald Trump. Right now, he's consistent in everything that he's doing, irrespective. He's a brand. He was a brand as a business mogul. Today, he's a brand for the consistently ways of attacking that he does. So he has created that persona of himself. If we take our footballers, for example, if you take Gyan or whoever, they are consistent in what they do, the way they dance on the field. They've created a brand image for themselves. And this is the same thing that happens with brands as well. They must be consistent. Today you can't be buying brand X and then it commits to you a certain thing that it does X, Y, Z, it washes brighter, it takes out stains, and then tomorrow it now decides and tells you that, oh, wait a second, now we also bleach clothes.
So consistency is key. Now, I know you've worked with some product lines in the country. You worked with Frital,
Yes.
From 8,000 tons a year to 12,000 a month. I'm sure it wasn't that easy, not as easy as we were saying it. Over what period were you able to do that?
Well, I came in 2010. All I can say is I think within 7 months we were able to capture at least 80% market.
That's quick.
Yep, but that was because purely obviously the team. Secondly, we took over a refinery that was pretty small. We put in a state-of-the-art larger refinery, 5 times the capacity. But it wasn't about that. It was purely being able to understand what is it that the Ghanaian consumer wants. You have to accept that Frital was a brand that has been here for many years. Why wasn't it able to do those kind of things then? Is it because we had a missing link in terms of what did they really want? What were they able to resonate with the brand? And the only thing I know I did at that time was, for example, the first thing was get the people to understand what fry it all meant. It was about fry it all. Secondly, we talked about the Star of Ghana, because Ghana is known for the black stars, and now we have the Golden Star. If you talk about the campaign, we brought people dressed as Ghanaians, being Ghanaians, because one thing that if you speak to everyone, they always tell you, oh no, Ghanaians are not proud to be Ghanaians. And you're like, that's not true. Then, we can show it. And we just took steps in that way of getting people to reflect who they really were, and that's what it was.
So what are some of the things you'd consider mistakes when it comes to businesses branding their products?
Shortcuts, number one. Number two is this idea that, wait a second, anything can work for Africa. We are not that anymore. I mean, you talk about people today. I was speaking to somebody earlier, and I said, if you look at Africa today, whether it's Ghana, anywhere else, today we're using our local names. We'd rather be known as Ni, we'd rather be known as Kafui, we'd rather be known as Wambui. We're not using our English names anymore. Why? Because we have realized that we are that. We are branded. It's coming from within. So this whole, Africa Rising aspects that are coming in, the shortcuts that people take, like let's quickly label, let's quickly create a name, is wrong. This whole idea of, wait a second, we can dump anything to Africans right now, they will take it and buy it as long as the price is cheap, is absolutely wrong. And the other thing is that where we think that you can bring anything, whether it's concepts or whatever, create them outside of Africa and accept that you can bring them to people and we're going to accept it very easily, that's wrong as well. So those are mistakes that we need to avoid. We need to start creating things within the continent because we only understand ourselves. No one else can do it better than us.
Some people tend to put themselves in, overdrive when they want to brand. They say all sorts of things. You get the product and then it doesn't work. How dangerous is that?
That's absolutely dangerous. It's absolutely, and that's why I said in any aspect, not only a product, even as an individual, that's why I'm talking about that consistency is very, very key because you have to be truthful about what you say. What you commit, what you say, it must do. You as an individual, what you say, you must live to it. Do not go and sing a different hymn.
How different is product branding from corporate branding?
It's the same thing. The principles are absolutely the same. It's just that with a brand, one fails, you can very easily go and open up another brand and create it and say, okay, that was a failure, let's try something else. With a corporate, once you kill it, you kill it. So no matter what else you bring out of that corporate brand, no one's going to believe it and accept it as easily as that.
Is there a time when there could be some sort of conflict between the corporate brand and the product
yes,
brand?
I mean, in terms of branding, there are different things. You can have a house of brands. If you take examples like Sony, Sony has a brand but it then has TV, it's in electronics, it's into music, it's now into, music systems, it's got other things. You talk about Coca-Cola, it has a brand, but then now it has products that come out of the Coca-Cola home, whether it's the Sprite, it's the Fanta, etc. So it totally depends on what kind of strategy one wants to take.
How do you deal with that so that neither of them suffers?
Well, it's very, very clear that there are different ways. One is the corporate, what it stands for, must match with what it's going to be bringing out. But at the same time, whatever is brought out of it has its own leg to stand. So that should that fail, it gets pulled out, but should never affect the corporate. It is all about the commitment. It's the vows that it cannot work in isolation. What the corporate chooses to believe in, it's like a parent. The values that you have is what you hope to instill in the children that you bring. So your children must walk the same path as you as a parent. So there's no differentiation between that.
A lot of times you go to some, companies or businesses and the people at the bottom of the pyramid don't seem to identify with the rest of the company. It's only amongst the executives.
Absolutely.
What do you have to say to people who work in organizations as that if they really want to maintain a corporate brand?
It's not even about the people. I think the challenge comes in from the corporate heads themselves. It's an African saying. We always say that, when a fish rots, it rots from the head first. And that's where the challenge comes in. So if the mindset is not changed from the top, it will have a ripple down effect to everyone, in the line. If you're going to start branding, you start creating that branding within. Everybody has to believe in what you're saying. If they don't believe in that, then that clearly means that it doesn't make a difference to what you're going to sell out to the consumers out there. So it's very, very important. If there is a disconnect within, because for example, if you have people in a company and for example, if it was Frital, you'd expect that they'd be using Frital at home. They shouldn't be using any other brand. And the reason they should do that, it's not because it's a company policy or it's a rule. It's because they believe in what you're saying about that brand as well. then they become your brand ambassadors to talk about it.
You worked on Brand Kenya.
Yes.
Which is where you're from.
Yes.
Now, Brand Ghana has tried to take over also. Why do you think that it's been really difficult for Ghana to sell its own brand?
I've actually been asking what this brand Ghana is. I've never seen it to date, and no one seems to be able to give me an answer about it. What I know is I did go online to check on what this brand Ghana thing was, and I just saw, some adverts and stuff created, and I must say, disappointed, because that's not what brand Ghana is about. I mean, you talk about South Africa today. South Africa was known about, in terms of apartheid. That's what people remembered it for. Today, people don't remember apartheid for South Africa. They know the World Cup. They know Vuvuzela. They talk about the Rainbow Nation. It has transformed overnight. Why? Because they had a team working on that, taking away all the negativity that was being seen on the internet. They came together as a people and said, we're going to do this. It's not about them having created an advert and saying, okay, this is what South Africa stands for. This is the mistake we made in Ghana. We created something, and assumed that the chichinga seller, the church priest, the lady sitting in Medina, the top-notch guy working at McKinsey all buy into that same belief of Ghana. They don't. So the first thing that gets to be done is the research part. We've got to go in, we've got to understand that, wait a second, what are the different views? What do you think about Ghana? What does he think about Ghana? And then how do we bring that together and make it work? Because then that belief means that we're singing from the same Bible, we're singing from the same Quran. Everybody says the same thing. So we've made the mistake of not understanding what the Ghanaian needs. What does a Ghanaian want? They're two different things. Your want is just what you have as an aspiration. Your need is your basic right. And that's why we really need to rethink about this. Ghana is known to be the think tank. If you talk to us in East Africa, we know Ghanaians are up there when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to intelligence. I mean, you take from what Kwame Nkrumah said, this is where the essence of intelligence oozes from. We haven't tapped into that.
And that's something we could brand.
It's definitely one of the key things. I mean, come on, how many people can walk out there and say, you know what, talk about knowledge, we're the tree of knowledge.
I see. But what lessons could we draw from the brand
security?
Kenya?
When you talk about security, you talk about different countries, different places. What's happened to, whether it's Egypt, what's happened to Tunisia. There's a lot of learning from there. We keep trying to sort of reinvent the wheel. And security is the number one need for anyone, be it a child, a parent, a business, an investment. Ghana has that. Ghana has that, and we're not capitalizing on that either. We need to be able to say that very proudly that, we are a secure country and we have that to offer.
Okay, so I was asking about, while working on Brand Kenya, I'm sure you encountered some challenges, which of course, once it's on the African continent, it cuts across for all other countries on the continent. What are some of those lessons you'd want Ghana to draw from?
I mean, just exactly what I've told you. Those are the same things. Do not go and decide for the people what they need and what they want or what the country should stand for. Speak to the people. Understand what it is, that they feel about the country. Understand what they like, what they don't like. And then take that and let's see how we ride on that.
When we come back, would discuss how much you need to put in terms of cost. What would it cost you to create a sustainable brand? We'll also look at the impact of social media now when it comes to branding. We're speaking to Fatima Ali Mohammed. She's an African brand warrior. You want to stay on for this part of the conversation. Now you know what to do, but how much do you need for this? Do you really need money at all, or you can work with some free tools we have now in this fast-moving world? This is Business Time. Don't go away.
Suavemente, bésame, que quiero sentir tus labios besándome.
Giant Malt is a non-alcoholic beverage which contains minerals and vitamins that gives you energy and power to keep you moving. Giant Malt brings out the giant in you.
Welcome back to Business Time. My name is Kemini. In this week's episode, We're discussing branding. We've had a pleasant conversation first half of the program already, but this is also an equally important part of the conversation. We're discussing what you need to put in it to be able to create that sustainable brand. Our guest today is Fatima Ali Abdullah. She's an African brand warrior. And so we've already started the conversation. We know what to do now. But do we need a lot of money, or do we need money at all to be able to create this?
We definitely need money, but I guess, you know, it's just like your dream. How big do you want to take it? I think it's normally very, excuse the word, foolish for a lot of businesses to put in a lot of money if it's not strategic. If they're not using a 360 degree campaign to push all these things, they need to be able to make sure that it ties in with the brand and always goes back to what is it that the brand stands for and who are your target audience. I mean, if you're going to be speaking to people in, for example, the youth, then social media comes into play. I mean, there's different media channels now to reach them. If you're talking to the older generation, you'd be using a different approach, because these are the kind of people who still prefer the traditional method of, you know, reading the news, checking newspapers, magazines and stuff like that. So it totally depends on what the brand is, what it wants to do, and then the phase-wise timelines that it has, and then what budgets they have in, you know, to put in.
What do you think about the use of ambassadors in building a brand?
It's a good thing and it's a bad thing as well. I mean, we can take a learning from Michael Jackson. You know, he was a fantastic brand ambassador for, I think it was Pepsi and other stuff. In his career, obviously, a few things happened when they were talking about child molestation and stuff like that. It killed the brand. It did affect it. I mean, at some point, the brand was very, very strong in certain places. It didn't affect it certain places. It did. So you've got to be careful. I know when I joined and I came to Ghana, one of the brands, Frital, also had the image of a woman on the label. The problem was I came in and I said, okay, can anybody tell me, you know, what was her contract? How many years was she supposed to be used for? Who is she? What does she do today? You know, so it's very, very scary when you don't know much about the person, what their background is, what they're currently doing. It can kill a brand. So you've got to be very, very careful. And we're all human beings. We're all prone to, you know, skeletons in our cupboards, which may come out at some point. So it is a pro if we're using it for a very, very short time for a specific promotion or a drive. But it's always best to get the brand to sell its own story and what it stands for.
But I'm sure there are always ways of going around the cost. So you've created, let's say you've created the brand. How do you put the message out there without spending too much?
That's why I said, I mean, it's very, very possible. You don't have to do things differently. Again, there are methods that you could use which requires corporate social action, which means you could go and use people or situations or cases that are there, which means you're doing it more from a PR perspective and drive what you want. You have social media today. You know, social media in comparison to traditional media is way, way, way cheaper. So you could use that to specifically, in fact, target your audience, whether it's through target profiling, that you can do that right now, which we can't do with traditional media. So your budgets are very, very usable in that.
Is there a way you could test the waters when you create the brand before putting it out there full scale?
Ideally, that's what should be done. Normally, that happens with companies that have a lot of money. You know, they could create a product and say, okay, we've reached to it. We don't mind the R&D costs on this, and we're going to try it within a focus group or a group of people to see what they really tell us. In today's day and age, no one has that money to do it, but it would make sense. So the best thing normally now is try the formula, try the product, show out concepts of what your proposed branding is. You know, have 4 or 5 options. Get people into a room who come out from your target audience. Tell them, what do you think about this? What do you like of this? Get them to taste the product, get them to feel the product, and let them give you a feedback. That will at least give you a representation, you know, of the total whole of what you want to sell.
But let's say you don't have the money to do that.
Then you take a chance and go with your gut feel that you really have something that you believe in and you believe that it can do what you promise it can do. And then go out there. And once you have a trial, then, you know, sometimes you have word of mouth. Word of mouth works faster than anything else.
I see. Now, let's summarize all of this. Just top 5 lessons you'd give to individuals, whoever is watching right now, took 5 lessons?
Be consistent. That's the first thing. You've got to make sure that you're truthful, which is very, very important. Always be truthful about what your product can offer, what you can offer as well, and get to know your audience. Get to know the people that you're targeting, and make sure that you don't shortchange yourself, because a lot of times brands come in and think that, if I come in at a much lower price, I will be doing this. Then you're literally short selling your brand.
I know I said that was the last question, but I want us to look at advertising and branding. A lot of people think that once they put out an advert, it could be
the answer to all their solutions.
Yes.
No, it isn't. It isn't, because it's like going and selling wine to the converted. If they're not going to believe in it, they're not going to believe in it. You've got to tell the story, but first get the product right, get the brand right, and then go out and tell that story. That's all advertising does, is to tell you the story as to why you should be picking this brand.
Thank you very much, Fatima, for coming.
Thank you very much.
We've been talking to Fatima Ali Mohammed. She's an African brand warrior, and we've been discussing branding, obviously. I hope that you've picked a few lessons for yourselves and you applied them. Let us know how it worked for you. If you want to get in touch with Fatima, I'll let you know how you can do that at the end of the program. So you stay on. Don't go away.
Suavemente, bésame, que quiero sentir tus labios besándome.
Giant Malt is a non-alcoholic beverage which contains minerals and vitamins that gives you energy and power to keep you moving. Giant Malt brings out the giant in you.
We've had a pleasant conversation with Fatima Ali Mohammed. I hope you've picked out your touch points for how to brand your business or how to brand that product you have been planning to sell. Now that we know that, let's check out activities that went down on the commodities and forex markets. Don't go away. So there you have it. Those were activities on the commodities and forex market that took place over the week. Don't forget that Business Time is brought to you in association with Lily Foods and Giant Malt, and powered by the Business and Financial Times newspaper, which you now find throughout the week on any newsstand in the country. Well, today happens to be the final episode for the first season of Business Time. We'll see you with a bigger and better Business Time Season 2 pretty shortly. But that's it from us and from me here at Business Time. We'll see you pretty soon. Goodbye.